And that sentiment about the Biden-Harris administration failing Americans seems to be spreading if the latest Polymarket data is any guide. Kamala Harris has gone from leading to now Trump is leading, and that lead is extending, particularly in recent days. We see a lot of polls, Josh. It can be hard to rely on that data because they do change a lot. Tell me how significant this data is.
I think Donald Trump's going to win. I do. I've been saying it the whole cycle. I have not wavered really at all. I mean, Donald Trump back in July was looking really, really good. So he had that few week stretch after the catastrophic Biden debate. There was the assassination attempt where he came within inches of losing his life on national TV, where all the world's sympathy was with him. He reached a high watermark then. Now, admittedly, the Trump campaign did not pivot as swiftly as it should have to the bloodless coup of Joe Biden for Kamala Harris. And then Kamala Harris got a long period, a slow rollout. She had the convention. She had probably about a 3 to 4 week rollout. And that was her high watermark. And personally, I was never freaking out as many of my fellow conservative commentators were, because I thought that the fundamentals at the end of the day still militate strongly in favor of Republicans this cycle. Namely, when you look at what the American people say about the big four issues that are going to dictate this election, the economy, inflation, immigration, and crime, the American people trust Republicans way, way, way more than Democrats. Right now, roughly 28% of Americans, last time I checked the big poll, said that America is on the right track. That is a catastrophically low number. An incumbent party is not going to win a re-election in a situation like that, where the public thinks that we're heading straight into abyss, which, by the way, I think we kind of are, unless things change fairly drastically here. So I do think that Donald Trump is going to win. I do not think that pollsters have fixed their structural and methodological flaws for the 2016 and 2020 elections. I'm not going to say that I'm confident on it. I wouldn't bet the ranch on it, but I do certainly think that Donald Trump at this point is more likely than not to win this election.
Well, you've got more faith in the system than I do. I just do fear that they're going to fortify another election. Certainly the media has done everything it can to swing the odds in Kamala Harris's favour. That campaign by the media, and I talk about the bulk of the mainstream media here, has been astonishing. I haven't seen anything like it before. Harris has copped, I've got to say, some criticism for appearing on the podcast, a fairly raunchy podcast called Call Her Daddy. We talked about it last night. This podcast typically features all sorts of talk about sexual acts, graphic descriptions of such sexual acts and other things as well. She's been accused of just essentially preaching to the choir. People saying, well, the demographics of that podcast, though it's got a decent-sized audience, are likely to be Democrat voters anyway. Is that how you see it, or was it a clever move by her to get on these platforms that perhaps don't hear from candidates too often?
If you're looking to persuade someone who's not going to vote for you already, then a Democratic candidate who is a rabid supporter of abortion going on the Call Her Daddy podcast is not exactly a way to persuade over the persuadable middle. You're certainly not going to win over blue collar union workers in the Marcellus Shale of Western Pennsylvania, or the auto workers in Wisconsin or Michigan. You're not going to win over those kind of folks going on the Call Her Daddy podcast. You're not going to win over the folks on the border in Arizona, or the folks who are being besieged by urban crime in Atlanta and Fulton County, Georgia. These are not the people that you're going to win over. She's doing this for one reason, Rita, and one reason only, which is to talk about the abortion issue, because that is currently the only issue that a non-negligible percentage of Americans say that they care about at the polls. And that of those issues, that is the only one they say they trust Democrats more on. So she's trying to shift the terrain of this election away from the issues that we just discussed, away from the inflation, economy, immigration, and crime, which are the big four issues. She's trying to switch it away from that to abortion. That's why she's going on this podcast that you accurately described as raunchy, a podcast where I believe the episode directly before she went on literally had a sexual act in the title that I am not going to discuss on this show out of respect for the viewers there. But this is not the kind of show that someone who wants to be the leader of the free world ought to go on. I mean, it is belittling of herself, I think, to give this woman and this platform airtime, frankly. But is she ever going to sit down for any? I mean, not a hostile interview. Is she going to sit down for a single real interview and actually answer real questions? So far, we've gotten Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC. She still flubbed that one, and then she's given us Alex Cooper on the Call Her Daddy Sexual Act Glorification podcast. I mean, are we running for leader of the free world or trying to get on the cover of Playboy magazine? I mean, sometimes the mind just reels.
Well, we played a little clip from Call Her Daddy, a previous episode on last night's show, and we had to bleep out approximately 70 to 80% of it. It was that filthy. I'm not suggesting it's like that every week. I don't know. I've never heard it, but certainly some of the content they have covered, wow, it's incredible that her team thought that was a good idea. You'd think you should go on something like Joe Rogan. If she wants to reach a mass audience of diverse people who listen to podcasts, that would be your number one choice, I would have thought. Now, let's take a look at some of her work on 60 Minutes. She struggled to show support for Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu.
Do we have a real close ally in Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people? And the answer to that question is yes.
And then she gave this incoherent answer on that same topic.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
Okay, Josh, what do you make of what you've just heard?
Some people are calling this a word salad, Rita. The problem is that a salad can at times be quite delicious. I mean, this is more closely analogous to a word turd sandwich, frankly. That is how I would prefer to describe this. Rita, I'm coming to you. I actually came straight from an event that President Trump did on October 7th. I came straight from Trump National Doral, his golf resort in South Florida. He hit a grand slam home run. This was an event that Trump did earlier today here in the United States, talking to a predominantly Jewish room, although there were certainly Christian supporters of Israel there as well. He gave a fantastic speech where he solemnly vowed to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Jewish people and the Jewish state of Israel. He said, "You will never, ever, ever have jihad or the threat of another Holocaust on my watch. This never would have happened under my watch." He said all of the right things, and he means it. He actually visited the Ohel. He visited the gravesite of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, may his memory be a blessing, one of the greatest Jewish sages of the 20th century. He was there earlier on Monday with Ben Shapiro up in New York City visiting this gravesite. I mean, this is a man whose natural sympathies for the broader Judeo-Christian inheritance that makes Western civilization cannot be doubted. You compare that to what we just heard there. I mean, how do you even compare that? I mean, Donald Trump is going to the Lubavitcher Rebbe's grave in New York City, and she's planting a tree at her place in Washington, D.C., and Tim Walz is sitting down with Stephen Colbert. I mean, you simply just cannot compare these two things. Final point, just real quick. Kamala Harris, right there in that response, tries to do something that a lot of Democrats do, which is to say, "Oh, I stand with Israel, just not with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Netanyahu government." Total baloney. Benjamin Netanyahu speaks for the Israeli people when it comes to his announced war aims of eradicating Hamas and returning the hostages, which have been his two war aims for a year now. Something like 80% of Israelis agree with those two war aims. So this purported divide between Netanyahu and the Israeli people, it's a false divide. You either stand with both or you stand with neither.
Yeah, her refusal to even try to answer that question, she immediately reframed the question to something she was comfortable answering, I think speaks volumes. Just on Elon Musk quickly, he's sat down for a wide-ranging interview with Tucker Carlson, but he was also with Donald Trump in Butler for that rally where Trump returned to the site of the first assassination attempt. He has really energized the Trump base, Elon Musk.
Yeah, he really has. And huge credit to Elon Musk. You know, it's funny with Elon Musk, who is quite literally the wealthiest man in the world, JD Vance, who went to Yale Law School, Donald Trump's an Ivy League man himself, went to UPenn. What you're starting to see emerge on the Republican side of the aisle here in the United States is what my friend Chris Rufo has quite artfully termed a counter elite. You know, we conservatives despise the current American ruling class, which is deeply hostile to our interests.
Josh, we are going to have to talk about the counter elite next week, because I think that is actually a very interesting phenomenon indeed. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.